All right, so Gary Neville has had plenty of things to say, and he has never been, let's call him soft spoken about the way that he feels and getting his opinions out there. Which love him or hate him, a man in that job, that's what you got to do. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna watch. I full transparency, I'm going into this clip blind, but I know how passionate he is when he's talking about Man United, and we're gonna check this out and see how everything goes. So let's take a watch.
Gareth, I know when you talk about recruitment, you say it shouldn't really happen that the manager, is doing that. I personally feel that you have to have that sort of happy medium where you have the manager and the director of football or someone from recruitment working together. Because what you've done with him is you've given him the exposure to get those players, and they haven't been good enough. Obviously, you've got Antony, 85 million. The other players I've got a list here. Mount Hoyland hasn't been as effective as you'd.
And let me stop right here real quick because all this reckless spending, and I get it. I don't want to be like rude here and say like, oh, they just spent without a plan. No, they've spent and they've had a plan, but it's clear that plan ain't it. Like that plan was not getting anything done for anybody, and because that plan hadn't really been put to fruition, now the whole operation is under scrutiny. Now everybody wants to scrutinize how much you pay for Antony, but the same time, wasn't nobody telling you not to buy him when the rumors were coming out that they were going to purchase him. But let's continue.
Like we go on and on and on as a goalkeeper, but surely I think back to Alex Ferguson when you were there, the most successful period Manchester.
All right, I gotta pause it here too because he mentioned the goalkeeper, and now like when Onana was coming and everybody heard that man was coming, everybody was excited. Like nobody was looking at that move like that wasn't a good move. When you look at just how well he played last year, and he was a big part of the reason why that Inter got all the way to the Champions League final last year. So to say that these signings are like underwhelming, I think you have to give things time in professional sports. Like let's also get that out there.
United had Alex Ferguson had his fingerprints on pretty much every single signing that come. So that's where you had so much success. So if the manager doesn't bring in the right players, that proves that probably he's not the right man because you're giving him that trust. If he thinks Antony's an £85 million player, that for me is such a worry. When I watch him play and what he brings to the team, that is terrifying that he thinks he's 85 million.
Yeah, that's the one that's going to stand out, I think, just on Eric Ten Hag, that 85 million, 90 million pounds on Antony.
That's all people want to talk about is how much they spent on him. I mean, that's life in a United shirt. I mean, they're just gonna go. They're gonna spend money on players that may or may not pan out. That's just a reality. And United is always going to want to be relevant, and they're going to want to make that big name splash signing almost every single offseason. So again, enough of the complaining about how much you spent on Antony. Like I'm so sick of hearing it.
Antony, where he's obviously nowhere near that level, but even the 70 odd million pounds on Hoyland is a lot of money. 55 million on Mount's a lot of money. 60 million on Casemiro and a 5-year deal is a lot of money.
Yeah, and not to mention how much these dudes are wages are on a week, because these dudes they're raking in the bacon over there on those wages. Those are not small wages as well as small transfer fees. But again, I think all of the signings that they made were really, really good signings, and it wasn't just splashing cash. Like they signed Casemiro for leadership, for defensive midfield. The man hasn't been healthy. When he was healthy, you win the FA Cup last year. Ain't nobody complaining about the signings. You see what I'm saying? Like you can't have it both ways, And Hoyland, I mean, what that man could do, he hasn't really done it that successfully either. But I argue that the jump from the Serie A to the Premier League is bigger than most people think. And Hoyland, he wasn't a nobody. Like he played well in that league, but it doesn't always translate so quickly, given there's a language barrier. I mean, I know he speaks English, but there's still a culture shock there of some degree with European players, even when going between country to country. So again, you want to get on these signings, but man, they're just a little rough.
There are a lot of deals that you can start to look at with a glass half empty, if you look at the recruitment. But Look, Jamie, I get your point around managers, but gone are the days, I think, where, your dad and maybe Sir Alex Ferguson, they would have travelled probably 3-4 times nights a week to go and watch other players, wouldn't they? And they would have been like a chief scout. They would have been head of academy. They would have been head of recruitment. Sir Alex Ferguson used to go and watch games at night. He'd then go and watch the academy playing the sort of, on the Saturday morning, then go to the first team in the afternoon.
Managers don't have that kind of time anymore. It's a different kind of league. It's a different kind of the way that business is handled. You got to hire somebody to come in and do business like that. You're not allowed to be able to focus on such small details of your club, especially a club of the stature of Man United. I mean, and it's partly because Sir Alex Ferguson, excuse me, um, got the club to that stature and the level that they're at today.
The head coaches that are here at these clubs now, they really do concentrate, maybe apart from, say, a Pep Guardiola and a Jurgen Klopp, who've really sort of got their foundations set at a club. They come in for a year, 2 years thinking, right, I've got to get these players right. And the transient roles, really, head coaches at football clubs, to the point whereby they're concentrating solely on coaching the team. So the people who are going watching the players around the world.
I think they're transient roles also because of the amount of money that these owners are A making and B willing to spend to bring a guy in and spend to get rid of him once they've decided that he's not good enough anymore. Again, like these are all, in my opinion, like self-inflicted wounds on Man United.
And this is a sort of global scouting game for Manchester United and the other top clubs in this country and in Europe. Those people have to be trusted to go and select the right players to bring forward to Erik ten Hag. And then, obviously, then they liaise, converse with each other, and they try and come to the right
Ten
conclusion.
Hag hasn't
What
been there
looks to have
long enough
happened
to
here
have
is
a
that Manchester
local
United's
scouting network.
recruitment department, we don't know what it is or who it is or how it's been built, but it's somewhere because they've got a lot of scouts employed. Can't have gone and watched Antony and signed him off at £85 million. It looks like they've allowed Erik ten Hag to overrule them, which is it's worrying because you need strength of leadership at the very top.
Can you ever see that one working, Gary, with Antony?
It's a difficult one. I tried to sort of in the first half do it, because the game was a bit slow, do a little bit of coaching. Where I was just trying to say to him, he's got two things, hasn't he? He can cut back, he can take it down the line, he can cut back on his left foot, and he can whip it
Yeah,
in
but
with his
he's
left foot as a
so
cross, or he can
left-footed.
cut inside, he can try and get a shot away. That was Riyad Mahrez's game for what would be 5, 6, 7 years at Leicester and Manchester City. And he's nowhere near Riyad Mahrez. He's nowhere near the level. But if you're a young player and you're trying to get some consistency in your game, you're trying to look at a player that you might be like, I was trying to sort of just give him a little bit of something to say.
Yeah, humility in film study. I mean, this is a great point by Gary Neville here when he talks about the fact that the young players need to watch somebody and model your game after them. I mean, the comparisons are already there in his game, but like he said, Mahrez is doing it way up here, and Antony is doing it way down here. He's a very, very generic brand version of Mahrez, and there's no shame in patterning a few pieces of your game after someone. Obviously, have your own style and your flair, but at the same time, there's no shame in my opinion, there's no shame in. I mean, maybe I am a minority opinion here, but what's the matter with patterning something in your game after another player that's already done it at a level that you wish to do it at with a similar skill set that you have? I don't see the problem there.
Say, can you just look at another player and try and cut? He doesn't look to me like he's had any work on him, and that's maybe a sort of insult to the coaching staff at United. Because I know a couple of them. I work with Steve McLaren. I can't believe Steve McLaren's not speaking to Antony and saying, "Look, just simplify your game back a little bit.
Mhm.
Pop it back to your fullback,
Yep.
make a spinning
Yeah.
behind. When you get
One
any
of
sort of
the
run."
sayings that I heard last year coaching soccer, and it's beautiful, is the simple things in soccer are the hardest things to do, and it's such a true phrase, and that is being like to me is being borne out right now in exactly what he's saying and the types of points that he's trying to get across. Like just simplify your game and take it back to the simple things. But again, the simple things in soccer are the hardest things to do on the field. It's and here we go.
that people look to come in and then just try and drift it into an area at the back post where you might put a goal on the training pitch and you might ask him to do it 30 times. This consistency and repetition that you used to see when you were developing young wingers, young wide players, where you know they're inconsistent. I do have my fears that the temperament is not there from Antony, that the consistency is not there. But what I would say
I think with Antony, and I don't know the guy at all, but from the outside looking in, I think it's an issue of humility. And I do agree that you have to have some level of arrogance and confidence in your game to make it to the levels that he's reached. But there comes a time when some humility needs to kind of creep into your diet as well. You know, you need to eat a bowl of humble pie, as they say.
He has something in that he does take the ball every single time, and he does want the ball every single time. And there are certain players out on that pitch that I don't feel they do. He actually wants the ball. Now, Garnacho, to be fair, wants the ball all the time. He thinks he can beat players. He's got the confidence.
But
Antony hasn't got the confidence at this moment.
The difference between Garnacho and Antony, like even you could say they're similar players to a degree. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and like get down in the weeds about it, but to a degree, they are very similar players. The difference being that Garnacho has figured some things out that Antony clearly has not. Again, I mean, this man here, love him or hate him, he knows the game.
Time to go and beat players, but he does show for it. But he's so frustrating. I mean, I blame the football club. I really do, for bringing him in at £85 million. It is not that boy's fault.
That's the point. I'm not. One of the most expensive
wide players in world football. He should never have been brought in for that money.
You've got to back your manager, Gary. You've got to back the manager. If your manager comes into Man United and he says, "Listen, I want this guy. Get him for me. I need him. He's got the ability."
Good point.
And you don't then back him. What kind of message does that send between the manager and the ownership? I don't agree with that. You've got to let him have his man. If he says he was my man at Ajax, I can get the best out of him.
Because he'd already coached
him before. You've got no trust already before he comes into the building.
He's been in.
No, but a manager at a football club will want a lot of players. That's just the nature of managers. They do want players.
Yeah, but he doesn't want every player. He wanted that
the magic word, which is no. And the magic word should have been said no to Antony, not based on the fact that you weren't supporting Eric Ten Hag, based on the fact that the actual quantum of money was too much. So same with Casemiro. Casemiro comes in at £15 million and he's 100 grand a week on a 3-year deal. Of course you bring him in. On 60 million, a 5-year deal at £20 million a year, which costs £160 million, you don't bring him in. There has to be a no when it gets to that level of money. And with Eric Ten Hag, with Antony, there was a report, I don't know if it's true or not, it was in the paper a couple of weeks ago. It was quite a detailed report that said that the scouts at Manchester United put a figure of around £25-30 million on Antony. I would say if we were looking at a £25 million winger out there today, we would be looking at him completely differently. So I get the fact you've got to back your manager, but you have to say no.
Yeah, but you have the benefit of hindsight.
With Jamie, with Antony and with Casemiro, United got beat by Brighton. They then got beat 4-0 by Brentford. And there was an 8-day gap where there was all hell breaking loose with the ownership from the fans. There was massive crisis. There's massive pressure. United were playing on a Monday night football against Liverpool at home. And the theory was, and the thought was from everybody, that Liverpool were going to come and beat Manchester United at Old Trafford. So what do the Glazers do? They then pump up a load of money to try and get the fans.
Yeah, but we know the Glazers don't know what the heck they're doing. They have repeatedly shown year over year over year, no real genuine interest in actually running the club the right way or whatever. I mean, it's an ATM for them. The club generates revenue, they go in the pot and take the money out and go do whatever it is they're going to do. They don't really ever have any genuine interest in running that club as it's supposed to be run. So, you know, whatever he's about to say next about the Glazers pumping in some money to the club, nobody, they don't know how to run a club. That's one of the biggest problems, is they got to get the right people in there to run that club.
Hands on side, they've done it time and time again in the last sort of 10 years with different players, and they went and offered 60 million for Casemiro. Real Madrid couldn't believe their luck that they got offered 60 million pounds for Casemiro. Casemiro couldn't believe he got offered the 400 odd grand a week that he's getting
Premier League
for 5
tax.
years. They couldn't believe it.
Man United tax. That's how I see it.
Done their business that summer. They've sold Martinez to Manchester United for 60 million. So they always sell one player every summer, Ajax, to balance the books. That's the way they stay sustainable. And they couldn't believe that Manchester United came in at 85 million. And they went,
yeah.
What?
They put a price so ridiculous on him that
we're going to have to sell him. And
Made
that's
an
what
offer you
happened.
couldn't refuse.
And United were in panic mode because they got beat 4-0 at Brentford and thought that they
Mhm.
were going to get beat by Liverpool. They actually beat Liverpool on the night. So, yeah, I get the fact you've got to back a manager, but where you've not got strong leadership, where you've not got a strong CEO, you've not got a strong sporting director,
Mhm.
that's where a manager then starts to sort of rule the roost. And because he got Champions League football, he
That
did a
is a
good
really good
first
point.
season,
That's a
he
really
then
good
gained
point.
power. And the people
Yeah.
above him in the club didn't have the ability or skill or competence to say no to him on these two signings because they panicked and
Yeah.
brought him in.
And I agree again here with this point. Is the ability, the skill, or the competence, or some combination of the three. Spot on. They did not have the ability, the skill, or the competence to tell this man no on a transfer that he clearly wanted to do. So, here I am. I know I've kind of sounded like I'm waffling here a little bit. And, I want to state my stance here very clearly is I think that they spent the money on the guy. That's neither here nor there. Now you got to focus on trying to get the best out of him that you can. And the scandal, the domestic violence scandal thing, that did not help his image or his playing position at all, at all. And you got a young player who's struggling on the pitch already as is, and then you throw something like that in the mix, and you throw the suspension in the mix, and then you remove him from the Brazil national team. I mean, like, all of these things are spiraling out of control, and he's in a country where he doesn't speak the language. Another, like, small thing, or small, easy to overlook thing that could be a really big deal to the player. So I'm not making excuses for the guy, but I'm saying now that he is here, you have to give the man time to settle in. I don't know how much time that is. That differs from player to player. But for this particular player, he's demonstrated that he's not had enough time to settle and find his way. I don't think he's garbage. I don't think he's trash. I do think you overpaid, but that was the price that was listed, and you said you wanted him, so you paid it. Now you're stuck with the guy. Go get the best out of him that you can. I don't think a loan spell is going to do him any good, because if you loan him to a lower league, then he's going to try to come back to the Premier League and try to figure some things out. I mean, maybe you send him to Serie A or something like that. And I mean, I know this sounds terrible calling Serie A like a lower league from the Premier League, but I think from top to bottom, the Premier League is just better. The bottom of the Serie A is really gross. Let's just put that out there. But all I'm saying is that if you loan the guy to another league, then he's got to come back and then readjust to this league. But also, again, loaning him to a league where the level of competition is more his playing field, and then he gains some confidence and then comes back into the club, maybe we're talking about a different player here. So continue.
Final thought then, Gary, and you've talked about Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Sir Dave Brailsford perhaps having a watching brief over the next 6 months. At any stage, if it gets worse than this for Manchester United, do you think the manager's position should come under scrutiny before the end of this
It's
season?
always under scrutiny.
No, I think they'll leave the manager in place till the end of the season, because I think they'll look at what's above it first, and they will make a decision on the manager by the end
And
of the
to me,
season.
it's not about just firing somebody. It's firing somebody, and then who are you actually going to get to come to that circus to take over? Oh, we just want to be done with this guy. Okay, that's fine. You want to be done with the guy, but, like, who's coming in? Who's signing up for that after you've just fired a very competent manager? Think about it.
And there's no doubt about that, because the reality of it is, at the moment, the performances are so poor. It's not the performances, actually. It's the fact that there's no pattern of play. And that's the worry.
I
Usually when
would
you
say
watch
the
a
tactics,
team,
they
even
look
Nuno,
lost
in the very
sometimes.
short time he's been at Nottingham Forest. I watched Nottingham Forest against Spurs a few weeks ago with Steve Cooper in charge. And then obviously I've watched them against Newcastle on television a few days ago, and I've watched them now today live. You can see already certain little things that are starting to occur that the manager wants. I'm really struggling this season with what Manchester United are trying to do. And I think that if that continues, if those 4 or 5 players come back, then Erik ten Hag will find himself under real pressure. But I think they will hold off on that decision to the end of the season, because I think they'll get a CEO in, a
Firing the
sporting
guy
director,
season,
and a head of
it's not a good
recruitment.
look.
They have got they're 3 gaping holes in the club. And then obviously then they have to look
What?
at the
The
stadium as
scouting
well, 'cause they
department
do
better
have to
get on
try
the
and put a
horse.
plan forward to the stadium, because Manchester United do have
You
to have
want to tell the
pride
manager no
in
on
its stadium and where
transfers?
it plays.
Go find him the players then that he should sign. You tell him what players he needs.
Well,
to
welcome
sign.
along to the final.
And I think I'm gonna end the video here. I'm not gonna start another one. So if you got to the end, I appreciate you watching. If you want to engage in some discussion about this video or discuss my reaction, hey, hit me in the comments below. Thanks again for tuning in. I'll catch you.